A single knock at our door changed everything. Kayla Sanders, the notorious HOA enforcer, was back, and this time, she had no idea she was walking straight into a trap she couldn't escape. Our neighborhood had been quiet, tense. Families hid behind curtains, afraid of Kayla and her corrupt enforcers. But that evening, a spark of resistance ignited. 3 neighbors arrived, each carrying stories of intimidation, threats, and financial ruin. One family had been forced to sell their home after Kayla fabricated a $40,000 sewage violation. Another endured repeated threats just for asking questions about community rules. And a third watched their life savings vanish into fines for violations that never existed. Julie, my wife, spread evidence across the dining room table with the precision of a federal prosecutor preparing for trial. Blake, she said, Kayla has stolen over $400,000 from families who thought they were just dealing with strict HOA rules. She explained how Kayla specifically targeted newcomers, minorities, and young professionals, people too intimidated to fight back. But Julie wasn't scared. She had been working with federal investigators for months, building a RICO case against this entire criminal network. When Kayla targeted us, she handed the FBI everything they needed. Morrison, the detective assisting Kayla, wasn't just a crooked cop. He falsified reports, justified illegal property seizures, and intimidated victims using his badge. Federal crimes. Serious prison time. And Julie had been documenting it all. By Wednesday, state investigators confirmed Morrison's deep involvement. Fake reports, witness intimidation, illegal foreclosures, his corruption spanned multiple communities. Julie calmly reviewed the case, knowing Kayla's next move would be reckless. That's when it escalates, she said. Kayla will make her biggest mistake tomorrow. And when she does, Officer Rodriguez will trigger the federal response that ends her criminal enterprise. Morrison returned the next day, bringing a rookie officer and an attitude that screamed desperation. Mrs. Parker, some residents are concerned your resistance might escalate, he warned. Julie didn't flinch. Under what statute does the Sheriff's Department enforce HOA disputes, she asked. Then she added, are you familiar with USC Title 18, Section 1962? It addresses civil rights violations under color of law. Morrison went white. Julie had planned this perfectly. She allowed Kayla to escalate while documenting everything, fake violations, corrupt officials, intimidation tactics. By the afternoon, the neighborhood had become a silent army of witnesses. Mrs. Collins had documents, Tom Rodriguez had his camera, and other neighbors were strategically positioned, all ready to document federal crimes. When Rodriguez arrives, Julie said, sipping coffee casually, everything changes. I realized she wasn't guessing. She knew exactly how Rodriguez would react, and how Kayla's world was about to end. Kayla arrived first, driving her oversized SUV like she was leading a victory parade, followed by Morrison in his patrol car. Behind them came a van full of supposed witnesses, members of her network ready to provide false testimony about our supposed violations. But the real show was happening among the legitimate neighbors. Mrs. Collins had taken her position on the porch, Tom Rodriguez washed his car while recording, and other families scattered strategically around the street, each pretending casual normalcy but prepared to witness every detail. Morrison's confident swagger was fading. He realized the intimidation tactics that always worked for him weren't going to survive the scrutiny of organized resistance. Julie prepared like she was about to deliver the most important courtroom performance of her life. Every file in order, every piece of evidence ready, FBI surveillance coordinated, and I understood the stakes. Rodriguez would expect a routine civil dispute. Kayla would present her fake violations, demand compliance, and expect Julie to cave. Instead, she was about to confront a federal judge who had spent 2 weeks building an airtight criminal case against her entire network. Every fake violation, every corrupt official, every intimidation tactic had been recorded and prepared for prosecution by someone who knew exactly how to turn civil fraud into federal charges. As Rodriguez stepped out of his patrol car, the tension in the air was electric. Kayla positioned herself like a prosecutor presenting to a jury, clipboard in hand, expecting to triumph. Morrison followed, trying to exude control. Rodriguez approached with professional neutrality, unaware that he was about to trigger a federal investigation that would make headlines. The moment Julie stepped onto the porch, dressed casually, holding a coffee mug, Rodriguez froze. Recognition dawned slowly, like a tremor building underground. His notepad slipped, his hand moved instinctively to his hat, and he muttered, "Wait. Judge, you live here?" Kayla's confident smile faltered. Julie's calm, measured presence was more terrifying than any threat she had thrown before. Julie handed Rodriguez a folder containing 2 weeks of meticulous evidence. Detective Morrison has been using his official authority to intimidate residents in furtherance of a criminal enterprise, she said. Rodriguez's professional shock turned into instant understanding. The scale of the federal case unfolded before him, and Morrison's face drained of color. Kayla's arrogance evaporated. Her criminal empire, built on intimidation and deception, was collapsing in real time. Federal agents emerged from unmarked vehicles, surrounding the street and ready to take action. Kayla screamed, desperate, "I didn't know. I was just enforcing community standards." But her protests only solidified the evidence against her. Morrison tried to retreat, but federal coordination had already been executed. Kayla and Morrison were led away, handcuffed, facing decades in federal prison for conspiracy, fraud, and civil rights violations. The neighborhood transformed overnight. Victims emerged, providing testimony and documentation that exposed a pattern of organized crime. Julie coordinated the federal response with surgical precision, turning our front yard into the epicenter of justice. Families who had been driven from their homes were restored, property values rebounded, and a genuine HOA emerged focused on community, not intimidation. 6 months later, Kayla Sanders was serving 18 years for federal racketeering, Morrison received 12 years, and the corrupt officials who had aided them faced charges of their own. The neighborhood was no longer ruled by fear but by unity and accountability, and I realized I had married someone who doesn't just believe in justice, she executes it with the patience, skill, and strategy of a federal judge who turns small disputes into monumental victories against corruption. The morning after the arrests, our street was alive with cautious optimism. Families peeked from windows and porches, no longer fearful, but still processing the shock of federal agents moving in and taking down people they'd seen as untouchable. Julie coordinated with the remaining neighbors, explaining which documents still needed official submission and which statements could be formally recorded. She had transformed our home into the nerve center for a multi-county prosecution. Every small detail she had collected became part of the larger narrative, proving beyond doubt the pattern of Kayla and Morrison's crimes. That morning, a few brave neighbors emerged from their homes, clutching envelopes of proof they had kept hidden. Mrs. Collins had photographs of fraudulent violations, Tom Rodriguez had recorded every interaction he witnessed, and the other families carried receipts, bank statements, and legal notices that showed years of systematic fraud. Julie guided them in preparing formal affidavits, each step meticulously designed to ensure that federal prosecutors had airtight evidence. Kayla's arrogance had been her downfall. She had assumed we were just fearful homeowners and that her intimidation tactics would work. She had no idea that every phone call, every visit, every fake violation would become a recorded criminal act in the hands of someone who knew exactly how to document and prosecute federal crimes. Morrison had assumed the same. His badge and supposed authority meant nothing when faced with a federal judge who could turn every threat he had made into prosecutable evidence. By midday, the neighborhood had become a controlled operation. Federal agents coordinated with Julie to ensure all evidence was cataloged, photographed, and entered into the official record. It was the culmination of weeks of preparation, strategic patience, and meticulous observation. Julie's foresight had allowed the criminals to make mistakes, escalate, and finally act in ways that built the case against them faster than any ordinary legal confrontation could have. Late that afternoon, Kayla was transported from our neighborhood under federal custody. Her expression shifted from arrogance to horror as she realized that everything she had built, years of intimidation, fraud, and manipulation, was now evidence in a federal prosecution. Morrison's career was finished, his freedom permanently revoked, and the other network members had no choice but to cooperate under threat of decades-long prison sentences. Families who had been driven from their homes finally received restitution, and the community started rebuilding under new leadership. Julie's strategic brilliance became obvious. She had never relied on her title to intimidate, she had relied on preparation, patience, and the law itself. Kayla had walked into a trap she didn't even see coming because Julie had allowed her to escalate. Every arrogant decision Kayla made was recorded and ready for federal prosecution. By evening, the neighborhood had changed. People were talking openly, organizing watch groups, and restoring the community spirit that had been suppressed by years of fear. 6 months later, the results were clear. Kayla Sanders pleaded guilty to federal racketeering and fraud, receiving 18 years in prison. Morrison received 12 years for civil rights violations under color of law, and the broader criminal network faced indictments. Families had regained their homes, property values had rebounded, and a genuine HOA had emerged, focused on community building rather than fear. Watching Julie coordinate the entire operation, I realized the true scale of what she had accomplished. She had turned a simple HOA dispute into the largest public corruption case our county had seen in decades. Kayla Sanders had underestimated the wrong person at the wrong house, and the result was permanent justice. Every fraudulent violation, every corrupt official, every act of intimidation had been documented and transformed into federal charges that would put decades of criminals behind bars. And in the quiet aftermath, as the neighborhood celebrated its newfound safety, I understood the deeper truth: Julie didn't just believe in justice. She lived it, orchestrating it with patience, skill, and unwavering strategic intelligence. Kayla Sanders picked the wrong house, threatened the wrong woman, and learned that federal justice is far more permanent than any HOA violation. Our neighborhood, once ruled by fear, had become a model of accountability, and the victims finally had the restitution and peace they deserved. Watching my wife systematically dismantle an entire criminal enterprise, I knew that sometimes the good guys really do win. Especially when they know exactly how to turn arrogance into evidence.